Imagine a country that was once just a small colony on the edge of the world. Imagine a land covered in dense jungle, with no cities, no roads, and no power. Now imagine that same country becoming one of the largest economies on Earth. Imagine it having the biggest rainforest in the world, the most famous carnival, and some of the best football players in history. This is the story of Brazil, a country that went from being a Portuguese colony to the giant of South America. This is the story of how Brazil became a giant. Brazil is massive. It is the fifth largest country in the world. It covers almost half of South America. It has over 200 million people. It is home to the Amazon rainforest, which is the largest rainforest on Earth. But Brazil was not always powerful. For hundreds of years, it was just a colony. It was a place where Europeans came to take resources and leave. The story of how Brazil became a giant is a story of struggle, discovery, and courage. Let us begin at the beginning. Before the Portuguese arrived, Brazil was home to millions of indigenous people. These were the original Brazilians. They lived in tribes across the vast land. They hunted, fished, and farmed. They had their own languages, cultures, and traditions. They lived in harmony with the forest. They called the land Pingorama, which means land of palm trees. They did not know that a great change was coming. In the year 1500, a Portuguese explorer named Pedro Álvares Cabral arrived on the coast of Brazil. He was sailing to India, but strong winds pushed his ships off course. He landed on a beautiful beach and claimed the land for Portugal. The Portuguese were not interested in the people. They were interested in one thing, a tree called pau-brasil. This tree had red wood that could be used to make dye. It was very valuable in Europe. The Portuguese cut down these trees and sent them back to Portugal. The name Brazil comes from this tree. For many years, the Portuguese did not pay much attention to Brazil. They were more interested in their colonies in Asia and Africa. But soon, other European countries began to show interest in Brazil. The French, the Dutch, and the English all tried to take parts of Brazil. The Portuguese realized they needed to protect their land. So, they started to build settlements and forts along the coast. They brought more people to Brazil. The colony began to grow. In the 16th century, Portugal started growing sugarcane in Brazil. Sugar was very valuable in Europe. It was called white gold. The Portuguese needed many workers to grow and harvest the sugarcane. At first, they tried to use the indigenous people as workers, but many of them died from diseases brought by the Europeans, or they ran away into the forest. So, the Portuguese did something terrible. They brought enslaved people from Africa to work on the sugar plantations. This was the beginning of the slave trade in Brazil. For over 300 years, millions of Africans were brought to Brazil in chains. They were forced to work on sugar plantations, in gold mines, and on farms. They suffered terribly, but they also brought their culture with them. They brought their music, their dances, their religion, and their food. These things became an important part of Brazilian culture. To this day, Brazil has the largest population of African descendants outside Africa. In the 1690s, something amazing happened. Explorers discovered gold in the mountains of Minas Gerais, which is in the southeast of Brazil. Suddenly, everyone wanted to go to Brazil. Thousands of people rushed into the region. They built towns and cities. They dug mines and searched for gold. The gold rush made Brazil very rich. It brought more money to the colony. It also brought more people, more conflicts, and more change. But the gold did not last forever. By the end of the 18th century, the gold was running out. Now, let us talk about the most important event in Brazil's history. In 1807, something happened that changed everything. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, invaded Portugal. The Portuguese royal family was terrified. They decided to escape. They did not go to another city in Europe. They went far away. They sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to Brazil. This was incredible. A European king and his entire court moved to a colony. King John VI of Portugal arrived in Brazil with 15,000 people. They brought their furniture, their clothes, their art, and their money. They settled in the city of Rio de Janeiro. Suddenly, Rio de Janeiro became the capital of the Portuguese Empire. Brazil was no longer just a colony. It was now the center of a giant empire. King John VI loved Brazil. He opened Brazil's ports to other countries. Before this, Brazil could only trade with Portugal. Now, Brazil could trade with England, France, and the United States. This brought huge economic growth. The king also built schools, hospitals, and libraries. He started industries. He brought science and culture to Brazil. For the first time, Brazil felt like an important place. But the Portuguese people back in Europe were not happy. They did not like that their king was living in a colony. They wanted him to return to Portugal. They wanted Brazil to go back to being a colony. In 1821, King John VI returned to Portugal. He left his son, Prince Pedro, in Brazil as the Prince Regent. The Portuguese government wanted to take away Brazil's new freedoms. They wanted to make Brazil a colony again. The Brazilian people were angry. They did not want to lose their independence. They did not want to be ruled from far away. They looked to Prince Pedro for leadership. On September 7, 1822, Prince Pedro made a historic decision. He was near the Ipiranga River and he declared independence or death. This became known as the Cry of Ipiranga. Brazil became an independent country. Prince Pedro became the first emperor of Brazil. He was only 23 years old. Brazil's independence was different from other countries in the Americas. It was peaceful. There was no long, bloody war. The people of Brazil did not have to fight against their own king. They just declared independence, and it happened. This was very unusual. It made Brazil's transition to independence smoother and less violent. Emperor Pedro I ruled Brazil for several years, but he was not a very good ruler. He made many enemies. In 1831, he was forced to give up his throne. He returned to Portugal, and his 5-year-old son became Emperor Pedro II. For many years, Brazil was ruled by regents, but when Pedro II became old enough, he proved to be a brilliant ruler. He was intelligent, kind, and loved by his people. He ruled Brazil for almost 50 years. Under Emperor Pedro II, Brazil grew and modernized. The economy boomed. Coffee became Brazil's most important product. Brazil became the largest producer of coffee in the world. The country built railroads, factories, and schools. It attracted millions of immigrants from Europe, especially from Italy, Germany, and Spain. These immigrants brought new skills and energy. They helped build Brazil's cities and industries. Brazil was becoming a giant. But there was still one big problem. Slavery was still legal in Brazil. Brazil was the last country in the Americas to end slavery. Many people in Brazil wanted to end slavery. They believed it was wrong and cruel. In 1888, Princess Isabel, the daughter of Emperor Pedro II, signed the law that ended slavery. It was called the Golden Law. Over 700,000 enslaved people were freed. It was a great moment for Brazil. But ending slavery also created problems. The landowners were angry because they lost their workers. The freed slaves had no money, no land, and no education. Many of them moved to the cities, where they faced poverty and discrimination. And many powerful people blamed the emperor for the end of slavery. They decided that Brazil should become a republic. In 1889, a group of military officers overthrew Emperor Pedro II. They declared Brazil a republic. The emperor went into exile in Europe. He was sad and lonely. He died a few years later. Brazil had a new government, but the republic was not a democracy for everyone. Only wealthy men could vote. The power was still in the hands of the rich landowners. For the next 100 years, Brazil went through many changes. It became an industrial nation. It built huge cities like São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. It grew coffee, soybeans, and beef. It found oil and minerals. Brazil's economy grew faster and faster. In the 1960s and 1970s, Brazil experienced an economic miracle. The country built highways, hydroelectric dams, and factories. Millions of people moved from the countryside to the cities. Brazil was becoming a modern nation. But the growth came at a cost. Brazil's governments were often dictatorships. The military controlled the country. There was corruption and inequality. The poor were often ignored. The Amazon rainforest was destroyed to make room for farms and cattle. Indigenous people lost their lands. Brazil's growth was not always good, but the people of Brazil never gave up. They fought for democracy, for justice, and for their rights. In 1985, Brazil returned to democracy. The people could finally vote for their president. Since then, Brazil has become one of the most important countries in the world. It is the largest economy in South America. It is a leader in agriculture, energy, and technology. It is also a cultural giant. Brazilian music like samba and bossa nova is famous everywhere. Brazilian food like feijoada and brigadeiros is loved by many. And of course, Brazil is the home of Pelé, Neymar, and the most successful football team in history. Brazil has won the World Cup 5 times. No other country has won more. Brazil is also the protector of the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon is called the lungs of the earth because it produces so much oxygen. It is home to millions of species of plants and animals. Brazil has a huge responsibility to protect it. The world is watching. The future of the planet depends, in part, on what happens in the Amazon. So, what can we learn from Brazil's story? Brazil teaches us that a country can rise from nothing to become a giant. It teaches us that diversity is a strength. Brazil is a mix of indigenous, African, and European cultures. This mix created a unique and vibrant nation. Brazil also teaches us that change takes time. Brazil did not become a giant overnight. It took hundreds of years of struggle, hard work, and hope. And Brazil teaches us that a country's greatest resource is its people. Brazil still has many problems. Poverty, inequality, and crime are big challenges. The rainforest is still being destroyed. But Brazil also has incredible potential. It has a young population. It has natural resources. It has culture and creativity. Brazil is still growing. It is still becoming a giant. Now, I have a question for you. What do you know about Brazil? Have you ever been there? Would you like to visit? Or maybe you would like to learn more about other South American countries? Write your answer in the comments below. I read all of them. If you enjoyed this story and want to learn English with fascinating stories, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.